Hello everyone and welcome back to the program. Following World War II, when Germany was literally in rubble, Herbert W. Armstrong boldly stated that Germany would rise again to lead a union of 10 nations in the territory of the old Roman Empire. Anyone familiar with his work instantly remembers his many articles, booklets, radio programs, and television shows about this union of 10 kings. On today's program, we're going to examine the dramatic transformation now taking place in Germany. How will this impact the rest of Europe? And where does it all fit within the framework of Bible prophecy?
The Trumpet Daily.
I just want to start by referring you to our latest Trumpet magazine. The issue here about how Donald Trump's trade policy could upset the global order. We have a feature article in this issue about how that trade wars have begun, and the Bible prophesied that this is how World War III would start. Yes, indeed, Bible prophecy. That's the great news source that world leaders and scientists have left completely out of the picture. And it's what sets apart the Trumpet magazine from all other news sources. If you aren't a subscriber yet, we offer this free of charge. There's no cost. There's no follow-up. If you give us your address, we'll send it to your box. Every month, 10 issues per year. We have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. This monthly magazine reports tomorrow's news today. It reports world news before it happens. Now we also have a website that goes along with this. You can look at our website. Our new website, we just recently relaunched it, new and improved. thetrumpet.com, you can go to that site and see that there's no annoying pop-out ads. There's no ads, period. Just a beautiful website with information you won't find anywhere else. I mean, we're seeing headlines today that were in the Trumpet magazine or at the Trumpet website years ago, sometimes decades ago. Of course, if you've followed this program for very long, you know that some of these headlines Herbert Armstrong talked about, like I said there at the top. He talked about this 50 and 60, 70 years ago. And now we see them being fulfilled. I just want to take you, speaking of headlines, that you read about first at the Trumpet. Let me just take you to one from back in 1999, so this is 8 years ago. It says here, once Europe no longer needs America's forces, it will no longer need or want America. Until that happens, however, a German-led Europe will continue using NATO to camouflage its imperialistic ambitions. And so that's what's happened for the past couple of decades. And you saw it in the 1990s with the breakup of Yugoslavia. Germany's the nation that wanted that. The rest of the world didn't. But Germany wanted it, and then NATO goes along. And of course, the United States did all of the heavy lifting. The United States provided all of the firepower. But it was Germany using NATO, as it says there, to camouflage its imperialistic ambitions. Notice further, it says, for now, this is from 1999, for now Europe will continue to use American firepower, but only as long as it needs it. When that is no longer the case, NATO's forces will be superseded by the European unions. Notice this, leaving a weakened Britain, Canada, and America on the outside looking in. It won't be long before Europe completely severs its ties with these English-speaking nations. Now that's what we wrote back in 1999, almost 20 years ago. And now look at the headlines today. Look at what you see all over the news with respect to a European military force, with respect to Europe going it alone, apart from the United States. And of course, here in Britain, with Brexit, Britain's on the way out as well. Let me just give you an example of this. This is from Spiegel magazine, February 2017. The title you can see there, Europe Must Plan to defend itself. I mean, look, this is earth-shaking. These kinds of developments, you couldn't imagine this happening 30, 40, 50 years ago, but it's happening today, and it's prophesied. We talked about it, as I said, in 1999. It says, Europe has long relied on America for its defense, but that era is rapidly, this is one of Germany's leading news magazines, that era is rapidly coming to an end. It's time for a stronger European defense alliance that is less dependent on the U.S. and more capable of asserting its own interests. Like I say, this is one of the leading news magazines in Germany. That article goes on to talk about how that NATO is not yet obsolete and that Europe still has some use for it, but that use is dwindling and that it's kind of a hollow organism. That's the way it talks about NATO today. One of Germany's leading news magazines. It says further, the era in European history when the continent could delegate its security to a partner across the Atlantic has passed. So we're entering into a new era. That's what they're saying. America remains a possible partner for Europe, but it's no longer a reliable one. In the medium term, Europe must be capable of sufficiently defending itself and providing for its own security. So, Spiegel says that America's withdrawal, and that's sort of the talk that the Trump administration has been going on with, that look, you members of NATO in Europe, you've got to provide for your own defense. You've got to start paying up. The days of that American umbrella of security, those days are over. And so Europe, Germany in particular, sees this as an opportunity. That's what Spiegel even says later in the article. This is our opportunity. This is Germany's opportunity. And in that same article, it even talks about Europe developing a nuclear deterrence. Imagine that back in 1945 or 1946. Imagine Winston Churchill or Franklin Roosevelt talking about, well, you know, Germany needs to step up and provide Europe with a nuclear deterrence. You can't imagine that happening coming out of World War II. But now, 70, 75 years on, the world's gone to sleep, and we see history beginning to repeat itself, and no one's even sounding the alarm. If you go back to the original establishment or formation of NATO, it was Lord Ismay who famously defined its role as keeping the Russians out, keeping the Americans in, and keeping the Germans down. Now, he wasn't against the German people, but he was aware of history. He was aware of what had happened several times in the century leading up to World War II. And so that was the purpose, in so many ways, for NATO coming out of World War II. And look at how dramatically that's changed. We've often referred to this signed document put out there by the Americans and the British following the end of World War II, saying that it's our purpose to destroy German militarism and to make sure it never rises again. All German armaments, we're going to destroy them and prevent history from repeating itself. It says in that document that it's going to break up the German general staff that has repeatedly contrived the resurgence of German militarism. That's been the record of history. And so we've got to stop it. That's what the Americans and the British said coming out of World War II. Now let me take you over to Revelation 17, because as I say, we want to make sure that we see where this all fits within the framework of Bible prophecy. This is Revelation 17. Get your Bible, read along with me. And I know some of these verses we've gone through before, but with so much happening every week, it seems like. And speaking of the Trumpet and the Trumpet.com, we also produce a daily radio broadcast, the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. The Trumpet Radio, you can get to the live stream if you just go to our website, thetrumpet.com, and you can hear what we have to say about the real significance of world events and where they all fit into Bible prophecy. That's at thetrumpet.com. Look for the live stream. Here in the UK, it plays at 1 p.m. every weekday afternoon. You can get the live stream or you can get the podcast that's posted later at the website. And listen in and watch and pray always, just like Jesus admonished us to do. Watch world events. Why did he say that? Why did he say watch world events? Most people don't do that, but why should we? Well, because so much is prophesied to happen right before the return of Jesus Christ, and we're living in the last days right now. Even the Bible talks about it being the last hour over in 1 John 2. No more delay, Revelation 10. I mean, events are just accelerating, these prophetic events, all of them. So look here in Revelation 17. We'll start in verse 8. It says here, the beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now, as we've noted before, Herbert W. Armstrong, he lived through the 6th resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. And he prophesied about the 7th and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. And that's what we're seeing form right now before our eyes. Herbert Armstrong's no longer on the scene. He died in 1986. But all of these things that he prophesied, all of these things that he talked about, like this prophecy in Revelation 17, we see it happening today. Verse 10 says, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, that was the one during Mr. Armstrong's ministry, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. So another one would come on the scene after Mr. Armstrong's work. And so that brings us to today. The Bible says, your Bible says that this 7th and final resurrection would continue for a short space. This short space in that 3.5-year tribulation period. Great tribulation, as Jesus said in Matthew 24. And here comes this 7th and final resurrection. It has iron-like strength, as it says in Daniel 2. We'll get to that here in the next segment. But it's an unstable mixture, a mixture of iron and clay. And so it continues just for a short time. It says here in verse 12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings, 1 hour with the beast. Now that's referring to the United States of Europe. There's still some dramatic changes that are going to take place in Europe. It's not going to be a massive union of some 27 members. It's going to be pared down. It's going to be pared down to the 10 groups, the 10 kings, the 10 horns. These nations coming together, and notice the unity, at least for this short time. Verse 13 says, these have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. One mind. It's headed up by Germany, as Mr. Armstrong said, for so many years. They all rally around that one king in Germany. And it fulfills Bible prophecy. Notice what it says over at Project Syndicate. This was an article that was posted recently. It says the key to enabling the EU to meet this potential to save itself and the world from catastrophe is for member states urgently to adopt a European Union first mantra. I mean, that's obviously in response to the so-called America First strategy promoted by the Trump administration. And so what's Europe's response? It's the same as so many other nations. Well, if you're going to put yourself first, we're going to put ourselves first. That's human nature. That's human nature, and that's what Project Syndicate's calling for. A European Union first mantra. If the U.S. cannot be counted on to support global stability, the EU's model and experience will become even more important. That's the way Europe sees the United States. Now, the United States doesn't necessarily understand this, but Europe sees the United States as someone that can't be counted on to support global stability. They see the current administration of the United States as being unstable. And so look at all the calls for a stronger unity. Look at all of the calls for a unified military force. These are all significant developments, and they're fulfilling Bible prophecy. I just want to again comment on how fast these events are moving. Look, you can even look at fairly recent history. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, he inherited this run-down, dilapidated military force. And yet just 5 years later, he had a Nazi military machine. That's how fast it happened in the 1930s. How much faster could it happen today? In some cases, the weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, they're already there. They're already on the continent. They're already in the United States. They're already in Britain. They're already in Russia and China. What happens when you start to see these prophecies being fulfilled? Think about how fast all of this could happen. As I say, you really do need the Trumpet magazine. You need to be a frequent visitor to the trumpet.com, our website. I mean, that's even more current than the magazine is, because you can get there just with the push of a button. Another publication, I'm not sure we've even advertised this before, Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. Some of the information in this publication here, we put it together many years ago, but just in reviewing a couple of these chapters the other day, I mean, you see how right up to date it is. Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. Make sure that you call our operators today and get your free copy of this wonderful brochure, and also become a regular subscriber to thetrumpet.com. We'll be right back.
Most people have ignored the fact that Herbert W. Armstrong warned the world that Germany would rise again. Only a very few listened. Mr. Armstrong said German industry and the German people's willpower and determination to work, produce and organize was the very heart and lifeblood of all Europe. He said the prostrate body of Europe could not come back without the leadership of a revived and vigorous Germany. The world is witnessing history repeat itself one more time. The seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire is happening today. Request Germany and the Holy Roman Empire for more on this important subject.
At the top of the last segment, I mentioned how the Trumpet magazine, we've been writing about so many of the events that we're seeing happen today. Another example of that is an article we wrote over 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago. It was about Germany's identity crisis. Notice, again, what we wrote at thetrumpet.com. This is September 2014. We wrote, the Germans are being forced to realize that meekness and passivity are ill-advised and dangerous in a world that is increasingly unstable, violent, and falling into anarchy. Many of Germany's leaders already recognize this reality and want to respond. For now, however, their ability to forge Germany into an assertive, aggressive, and dominant world power is being limited by the reticence and caution of the German public. That's what we said in 2014. It continues, but this is changing. Moreover, as the crises intensify and begin to impact the Germans more personally, their attitudes will change more rapidly and dramatically. And so we went on to talk about the new Germany that would emerge from all these crises, a Germany that would be more active, more aggressive than the one we're accustomed to seeing, a Germany that would be more militaristic as well. It continues here. This is from now December 2015 Trumpet. Perhaps the greatest effect of the refugee crisis, together with Russia's dramatic resurgence and Europe's rolling financial problems, is the way it is causing Europe to shed this post-war veneer and return to its past. Europe is returning to its past. Germany is returning to its history, what it normally does historically. And as you can learn just in studying World War II, I mean, it's a dark history. Now, it's not like God is against any one nation. Human nature is the problem here. But we've seen these cycles play out before. They keep repeating themselves. It continues. But there's another important angle to this crisis that hasn't received nearly enough consideration. This is the impact of the refugee crisis. So this was in 2015, right at the peak of the refugee crisis. The impact that it's having or will increasingly have on Europe. Not just the cost or the potential infiltration of Islamist terrorists or the inevitable erosion of European culture. These consequences are significant, but something more fundamental and more alarming is unfolding. Europe is experiencing a transformative identity crisis. That was at the end of 2015. And we were saying, look, Germany's about to come out of this identity crisis and rediscover its identity, its historical identity. Now go back and just consider some of the headlines following this trumpet piece. In early 2016, March, this is just 2 years ago, or rather last year, this is just a few months after that particular piece. March 2016, you had these two state elections where the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland Party, came in third. And then in, I think it was Saxony-Anhalt, it came in second, pulling in like 20% of the vote. And prior to this time, I mean, the AfD party was seen as sort of a fringe party that would maybe get 3-4% of the vote. But then all of a sudden, it starts pulling in 15 to 20%. And just last September, this is a few months ago, the AfD comes in second in a state election that happened to be right in Angela Merkel's home territory, her own district. Pulled in 20% of the vote. Even in Berlin, even in sophisticated multicultural Berlin, the AfD pulled in 15% almost. Notice what George Friedman had to say. This is at Geopolitical Futures, September 2016. It says, in Berlin, at least, the German political system has shattered. If the Berlin results are replicated on a national level, Germany is going to become ungovernable. This result, taken at face value, indicates that the European foundation, Germany, is moving toward a major political crisis that will resonate. That's what we're moving toward. You can see the signs. The handwriting is on the wall. Now let me refer you to a New York Times piece. This is from earlier this year, February 2017. Germany's taboos, once a bulwark against the far right, may now be enabling it. It talks about how the far right is rising across Europe and that in Germany, this is most puzzling, the Times says. For decades, Germany was thought to be inoculated against the far right politics by its history with Nazism and the Holocaust. But today, Germany is experiencing a resurgence of the right, driven at least in part by its effort to overcome past misdeeds by suppressing any vestige of nationalism. That's from the New York Times. I mean, since the end of World War II, the article points out how that the Germans have typically downplayed their national identity, but this is all changing and fast. It's changing fast. The AfD party is that's the nation's fastest growing party. Notice the New York Times, it says that focus on identity has allowed the AfD, even if it is unlikely to win enough votes to govern, to shape the national conversation to its advantage and to present itself as the champion of ordinary Germans. See, they may not come in first, but when you start coming in second and third, you can begin to shape the national conversation. And that's what's happening. Let me take you over to Daniel chapter 2. Just a few more verses here. We're about out of time. It talks about this fourth kingdom, the Roman kingdom, 4 great world-ruling empires. Verse 40 speaks of that fourth one. And then down in verse 43, let me just read this in the Revised Standard Version. Back to verse 42, it talks about the toes of the feet, that they're part iron and part clay. And then verse 43 in the Revised Standard says, as you saw the iron mixed with miry clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Now you put it together with what we covered in the first segment from Revelation 17. Remember, they come together for 1 hour with the beast, these 10. They have one mind. There's all of that iron-like strength for that short term. But it doesn't last for years and years and years. It's just within that short tribulation period because of this unstable mixture. And it leads right into, as it says here in verse 44, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. So that's what all of these prophecies are building toward. It's leading right up to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Remember, as I said in the first segment, Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. This is the first time we've made this available on television here in the UK. Make sure that you call our operators or go to our website or text us with your address information so that we can send you a free copy of this brochure, along with a free subscription to our monthly magazine, the Philadelphia Trumpet. That's all that we have time for today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.